on this computer. Welcome, Maxwell. You can begin.
Okay, so good evening to you all. My name is Maxwell. So for today, I'll be presenting on the first quarter for Scancom Ghana PLC, their earnings reports. We'll be doing a deep dive into what the company is doing with respect to their earnings and also other metrics, other key metrics of interest. Okay, so just to brush up on some details that most of us might not know, Scancom PLC is a subsidiary which was acquired by MTN Group, South Africa. They are trading under the ticker MTN Ghana on the Ghana Stock Exchange. And as I've said previously, prior to February this year, Scancom was basically a telecommunications company, but they, under the umbrella of their parent company, MTN Group, have evolved to become a broad technology company, obviously venturing into other areas beyond telecommunications, like financial services and even app development. So that's basically a direction of Scancom PLC, which is MTN today. It's not just a telecommunications company, it's a technology company. And they aim to be the leading digital platform via their Ambition 2024 on the continent. And they intend to champion this through their flagship apps and enterprise business solutions. So with respect to Q1, how did MTN Ghana fare or Scancom PLC fare on so many levels? We would, for today's session, would want to look at certain key metric highlights, subscriber growth in all aspects. With respect to subscriber, we know we have general subscribers, voice subscribers, and we have data subscribers and Momo. So we would want to compartmentalize all these into areas where we can really decompose them. So in Q1, just a quick commentary. In Q1, Scancom PLC MTN Ghana saw appreciable growth across board with respect to subscriber count, service revenue, and earnings. This performance by the telco beat expectations of many analysts, given that the COVID-19 pandemic was, and of course, I'm speaking for 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic was very present with a new variant rearing its head in the final quarter of 2020, which is a quarter previous, forcing the government to implement more restrictions on an economy already brought to its knees. The general investor sentiment at the time was not upbeat, and coming into Q1 for 2021, with most companies reporting losses and some even being forced to lay off staff in a bid to implement various cost-cutting measures. Scancom PLC's performance was all the more impressive on account of the fact that the company had just come out of a tumultuous year. Pandemic aside, we had to take into account government's significant market S&P categorization, and also various outages with respect to their sub deep sea and submarine cables. That's also one area worthy of note. Generally, during the pandemic, we also saw there was increased demand because people were working from home and people were just going onto the internet. There was just a digital migration. MTN had to deal with the increase in demand for bandwidth, which caught us by surprise, but they were able to innovate and basically take advantage of the opportunities thereof. So in Q1 in 2021, we saw a reflection of that. MTN generally, with respect to their income statement and their balance sheet, you saw that they went heavy on certain investments. And of course, the bad public relations did not also help. It took a hit on its stock. You would observe in the share price history later on, you saw that there was a bit of selling pressure at the time when they were categorized as a significant market player. Comparatively, in Q1 2022, which is the just ended quarter, we saw performance was noticeably better, with almost 24 months of the pandemic being marked. It was evident that the worst was behind Scancom PLC, with the company posting excellent figures in subscriber count, service revenue, and earnings. The standout areas were active data subscriber count, which went up. MTN saw a 14.4% increase from the previous quarter, which was Q4 2021, signaling the telco was still the internet service provider of choice for most households. Now this is obviously a pictorial representation of the Q1 2022 subscriber growth. And just so that we cut our teeth onto it so that we appreciate the figures, you see with respect to mobile subscribers, for a quarter by quarter increase, there was an 8.4 increase from Q4 2021, and the translating figure was 27.1 million with respect to mobile subscribers. And this represents the current count of mobile subscribers. and it was up 8.4% from Q4 2021, which signals relatively high growth in many opinions. Then we are looking at active data subscription. This is why I re-echoed the fact that MTN was the internet service provider of choice, has remained the internet service provider of choice, where they chalked an impressive 14.4% increase quarter on quarter from Q4 to Q1 in terms of data subscribers, and that translated to 12.8 million subscribers using MTN internet. And this noticeably actually caused a shift in terms of revenue, where now the bulk of their revenue is slowly shifting away from voice to data. And the company sees this as a direction to go, given its digital drive. Then Momo subscribers, this is also another key area of note. You saw very impressive figures of 7.7% increase from Q4 2021 to Q1 2022. And this came off the back of the general sentiment that people moved to Momo simply for the reason that it was more convenient. So MTN has tried its best to put Momo at the forefront of its business, where in terms of ad campaigns and advertisement drives, MTN has somewhat tried to separate the two, where you realize that they run it concurrently with other ad campaigns. So now Momo can almost identify itself as an individual brand from the MTN brand, although they are one and the same. And this obviously has paid dividends for the company. As you can see, in terms of percentage increase, of 7.7% increase in Momo subscribers from Q4 2021 to Q1 2022. And that represents 11.7 million subscribers overall, which is very impressive feat, and obviously means that they are way above their industry peers in terms of the subscriber growth in all these areas. Then now let's look at Q1 2021, and let's do the comparison. So Q1 2022 was obviously good, given the various successes they chalked. And if you observed in Q1, right off the back of a pandemic-ridden year, which is 2020, where we had the variants and lockdown measures basically stifling most businesses and their growth, MTN recorded very, very modest gains with respect to mobile subscribers. They stood at around 25 million overall subscribers, which was around 2 million subscribers shy of today's figure, which is 27.1 million. And that represented a 2.4% increase from the previous quarter. And just to give you context, let's go back to 2022. You could see an 8.4% increase. So a quarter by quarter comparison means MTN outdid itself when you compare Q1 2021 to Q1 2022. So with respect to active data subscribers, as at the time, just to cast our minds back, most of you remember that in 2020, when the pandemic hit, in 2021, in 2019 rather, when the pandemic hit, a lot of companies were trying to iterate their business models, and MTN was no different. They went heavy on their CapEx investments into ramping up their cell sites and their 4G coverage and their roaming services. And that only came to bear in 2022. If we look at the general migration towards who could offer the best in light of the current circumstance, where people were more interested in who could offer stable internet. And you could, of course, we see that fully realized in Q1, where you see huge gains with respect to active data subscribers. But that was actually also sort of teasing itself out somewhere in Q1 2021 with respect to data subscribers. You could see a 4% quarter-on-quarter increase with respect to data subscribers, bringing the figure to around 11.2 million. And you can also see here in Q1 2022, the figure was 12.8. So you can see, if you can appreciate the difference, it's rather considerable. And this obviously pays homage to the fact that MTN has done wonders with respect to its digitization drive and its heavy investment into CapEx and also infrastructure overall, actually. And then now let's talk about Momo subscribers. Generally, MTN, if you observe, has gone heavy on mobile money, and the results are there for all of us to appreciate. Q1 2022 subscriber growth in Momo stood at 7.7, which is honestly jaw-dropping. But then when you look at the previous quarter, the year before, Q1 2021, the difference was 1.2. So now a strong first quarter with respect to Momo subscriber growth for MTN has, and of course they owe credits to their advertisement and their improvement of service and basically their wider product offerings. You could see they've gone heavy on their loan offerings in particular, where now it's more flexible, and they've widened the pool of funds available because now they've incorporated a Ghana card, which is obviously a more secure way of ensuring funds are retrieved. So that's one. And of course, I've mentioned advertisement, which is no exception. So then Momo across board data, active data, mobile subscribers, they are chalking huge or massive gains. And this is obviously a symptom of growth, so to speak. And at least MTN is doing something right. We can assume that. Now let's look at financials. So quarter by quarter, Q1 March, period ended March 31st, 2022, compared to period ended 31st March 2021. Total revenues, and of course, this total revenue is different from service revenue. I think we should all note that. Total revenue, we have these figures are in billions, I believe, 2.3, something in the region of 2.355892 billion. It's up. General total revenue is up from the previous year's first quarter. You can see a 34.4% change, which is impressive. And that obviously outperforms the industry on so many levels. Of course, in this very precarious time for business, chalking 34% increase in revenue is something to write home about. Then service revenue in particular, where we'll be looking at voice and data and Momo, which comes with its charges, which is the source of revenue. Service revenue, you'd find that MTN has done considerably well, up a rather impressive 34.5% increase, still hovering around the same 2 billion figure, 2.3 billion, up from a previous 1.7 billion for 2021. Then EBI, TDA, earnings before tax, depreciation and amortization. You see MTN also chalking some rather impressive gains, 1.4 billion, that's against 900 million. So that's also impressive. Now, the margins have improved with respect to earnings before tax and depreciation and amortization. They chalked a 4.9 percentage points increase on that margin, which is obviously symbolic that they were very, very efficient in their business model. They obviously doubled down on certain areas and they are reaping the benefits. Now, profit before tax stood at something in the region of 1 billion, as you can see, up 56.4%. Previously was 600 million. Profit after tax, up 53.7%, was 700 million. Previously was 460 million. Total capex. Now, this is one area you should pay attention to. So, total capital expenditure. I'm sure you've heard that, and of course, I've been re-echoing this point, that MTN went the extra mile compared to its peers, because given its market share, it couldn't disappoint its customers, and it saw an opportunity to capitalize on. So what MTN did was it went heavy on this investment. You can see the kind of capital expenditure it basically expended in the year 2022 by first quarter, 277 million Ghana cedi, rather considerable compared to something around 86 million, up 220.9%, considerable. And this is what I'm fond of saying, MTN is sacrificing today for tomorrow, because the only way to get ahead is to invest in infrastructure and other areas which will keep you, would widen their ever-growing competitive advantage. And that's almost like, a basic rule for business and entrepreneurship. You need to get ahead, you need to double down on research, you need to double down on various aspects which keeps the business afloat. Okay, so now let's focus on key financial items. So now this one, of course, this is a follow-up to what we just discussed, to give you a graphical appreciation of what we just discussed. In terms of total revenue, you can see something in that region, a clear difference comparing various quarters, the Q1 2021 and Q1 2022. You can see it's clearly evident that they have outperformed with respect to this just ended quarter. Service revenue is no different. Like I said, when you decompose service revenue, you'd find that there's a gradual shift away from they chalking most of their revenue from basic voice, and they are moving more to data, which is more in line with their ambition 2024, I believe, where 2025, I believe, where they are going to have their trajectory basically towards digitization and being the leading platform or providing digital solutions. And yeah, basically this should give all of us an idea of what is going on. So of course, emphasis again is on the capex, as you can see, almost double, in fact, double what they put in previously. And this is because of increasing demand and the goal of MTN. Okay, so now let's give ourselves context again. Share price. Now, this is very interesting because if you look at the fundamentals of the business, you might be misled if you are just paying attention to what's going on the charts. It's a far cry from reality. When you look at it, MTN obviously IPO'd somewhere around 3 years ago. It was 75 pesos IPO price. And initially, given the buzz around it and honestly, the mobilization campaign MTN itself did, you could find that they made it very available to almost any ordinary person to get access. So people really bought in, and that made it very bullish in the short term. You see that the price did go up at this point. And when the price went up, obviously people could say it was overbought. So it experienced some selling pressure from this point where it tested the support level somewhere here for a while. Then again, it broke this support level. It it hovered around here for a while. And of course, if you study the timeline, you'll observe that there are certain fundamental factors that attribute to this beyond technical ones. And at those points, you could have, let's look at 2020 in particular, somewhere in between May and 2020 and September, I believe. No, somewhere between May and September, you'd find that they were tussling with regulators about this S&P categorization, which they disagreed with, but then later they found common ground. So the stock took a beating in that period, and interest rates hikes obviously did have their part to play. But then you saw a rebound in the stock when somewhere by the close of 2020 to the early parts of 2021, investor sentiment was on the high overall, where you saw the GSE itself becoming the highest performing stock exchange, only to be beaten out by the Zambia Stock Exchange going to the close of the year. And almost all the stocks were rallying at that point. MTN being the lead in terms of volatility was obviously following that trend. You saw a spike in the price where it peaked at around a CD 25 cents. At that point, we saw most fund managers pouring into MTN, and the general sentiment at that point was, in fact, most analysts at that point were of the opinion that it was overbought. So at that point, and coming in with a combination of factors like high interest rate and unstable macroeconomic conditions, this year has not been the best for this quarter in particular, has not been the best for the stock because it has undergone a lot of selling pressure or correction, as some people would like to put it. And you can see it tumbled from one CD 25 pesos to where it is currently, which is 90 pesos as of the close of the exchange, or I think this morning, yeah, I believe, or I think as of Friday, it was 90 pesos. So it's going to hover around, my projection is that it's going to hover around 90 pesos for a while. And the reason why I say that is because generally the sentiment is e-levy and other macroeconomic interventions by government are going to put a bit of pressure on stocks because, you know, stocks generally have a lot of debt, and where with increasing interest, it does happen that it would have a negative effect because then the cost of borrowing, when the cost of borrowing goes up, generally it will affect businesses like tech stocks, which obviously ride on the fact that they would have capital gains in the long term. There's a relation there, I believe, and it's going to cause MTN stock to hover around this 90 peso mark for a while. It could go down a bit, but in the long term, MTN is the stock of choice, given that they have very strong fundamentals. And I would give you a snapshot of that in a moment. Okay, so now what's the general market and economic outlook or analysis? So generally, I think I've hit on some of these points, so I wouldn't go through them given how wordy they are. But the Ghanaian economy experienced the top 2022 first quarter. We had our CD tumbling almost 30%, one of the worst performing overall. And this obviously has had a ripple effect on the economy. And you see that unstable macroeconomic conditions have meant that external shocks have really been felt by almost everybody, from soaring prices, inflationary pressures, to double-digit, to increased pressure and spending from consumers. And we also heard about how the country's credit worthiness was downgraded. We are a couple of steps away from being junk. And that is obviously a signal to investors that the country is not in a position to settle its debt in the long term. And that obviously is not a good outlook. What does that mean? The uncertainty and volatility on a macro level and business operating environment has been exacerbated by global trends such as the Ukraine-Russia war. MTN has stayed focused on the commercial execution in the face of this uncertain and challenging macroeconomic environment. The government has initiated various actions such as raising the policy rate. Like I said, interest rates are going up in a bid to combat inflation, passing e-levy to basically fill up the revenue deficit, which some people think is the way to go, taxing people. What that means is that when you tax people, it's more of on a fiscal policy level, it will contract the economy because taxation would obviously lead to less ability to spend. You understand? So it's more of a contraction kind of angle. So what that means is that you are taxing people less disposable income, and that every business will take a hit in such an environment. And MTN does not recognizes rather that these conditions are rife and they have to adjust to this reality. So they want stakeholders to be aware of this and they would adjust accordingly. The government has initiated various actions such as raising policy rates, passing the electronic transactions levy, and introducing spending cuts to stabilize and correct these adverse trends and stabilize the economy. So MTN is obviously letting us know that, of course, MTN is aware that these conditions are rife and they are going to try their best to weather the storm. But good news on the horizon is that MTN is taking advantage of certain regulatory measures like this network sharing, which is strategic partnerships spearheaded by governments to ensure that there is national roaming availability. What that means is that everyone can piggyback off the other's infrastructure, such that if you have this device which is for MTN, you can go to certain places and you can use cell sites that belong to non-MTN service providers. And it allows almost 100% roaming, national roaming coverage. You understand? And this obviously is a win-win in various perspectives. And MTN is the first to sign an agreement with Vodafone. That way they can collaborate and use each other's infrastructure to ensure network sharing. And this is a strategic partnership, and it will ensure that it will maximize. You see, let me break that down. So most people don't really see the benefit of this. And the benefit of this strategic network partnership is that people might not feel a need to jump off a particular network because it's not available. So now you realize that networks will be forced to focus on their core business and not just ride on availability or non-availability. Some people say maybe Vodafone is best in QAPM, so when I go, I switch. That has been a unique revenue generation tool for some people. But then when you eliminate that hindrance, what that means is that now everyone has to focus on their various service revenue and how they can best optimize that. It creates a very level playing field. Some people say MTN being the largest market, having the largest market share might be given an extra edge. But what it does is that it allows all of them the free hand to work on improving their various product offerings aside the infrastructure. So relatively obscure networks like Glow, for example, are able to piggyback off MTN's or basically let their customers use MTN's infrastructure. Now they can focus on pricing or providing higher quality products. And then that is where their unique selling points will be. Okay, moving on. So MTN, in the face of the potential impact of the general macroeconomic volatility and new regulatory developments such as the e-levy, on their business, remain poised to execute on Ambition 2025, focused on long-term value creation for stakeholders while maintaining a medium-term guidance for service revenue growth of high teens. So what they mean by medium-term guidance is in the long run, the long play for MTN is they want to create value, but at the same time, they understand that investors or stakeholders might be in for a short term or a medium term, and they are guaranteeing that they can return a revenue growth in the high teens. You understand? And what that means for them is going to max out. They're still going to be a very good company of choice. So they will give good returns. At the same time, in the long term, they are focusing on that as well. Recommendation for me is I recommend a hold or a moderate buy for investors looking for a long-term play in the market. And the reason why I picked these words is this word in particular, which is a moderate buy, is maybe not for people have various investing appetites or risk appetites. So ideally, my opinion is MTN is still the stock of choice for two categories of people who want to play the stock market in the long run. They are looking to basically put money away for a couple of years' time. But people who also want to hold maybe in the medium term, like 2 to 5 years, those people, MTN still is a choice because given their strong fundamentals, it will come a time where investor sentiment around MTN stock would obviously be upbeat, like somewhere around 2019, where if we go back, so somewhere around late 2020, where we saw a surge or a rally in the price. It's obviously, and that would obviously come to light. And we know MTN has secured licenses for 5G. So all these things are obviously a telltale sign of MTN and how they are future focused. At the same time, they are catering to the needs of their stakeholders. So that's basically it for today's presentation. Thank you very much. I'll take questions now.
Thank you, Maxwell. I think it is a wonderful presentation. I would like to state here that the recommendation we make here is the view of analysts of Young Investors Network. In case anyone watching this video wants to purchase some shares in this company, it is important that you speak to an investment advisor. There are a lot of qualified investment firms in the country. It is important that you speak to any of them. You ensure that you see the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission Ghana, certificate on the wall before you speak to them. Other than that, you should look somewhere else. This is our view, and we intend discussing the companies listed on the markets as they release the financials. All right, so thank you, Maxwell, again. Dylan is off. Ebenezer Alasana, do you have anything to say?
Right. Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Right. So great presentation there. All right. So last year we saw MTN stocks doing massive 0.65, then ended the year close to, I say, 1.3 or something. And that was about 95% to 100% increment. Now this year we've seen their one of their major revenue drivers, which is the Momo, greatly affected by the government policies, the patronage of their services back then. They've also, they are for and it's clear that their revenue is going to be affected. So now you are saying that their share price is going to be around the 0.9, which is what it is currently trading. Okay. And for the rest of the year in 2022, it appears that with this policy from the government, they are going to continue to suffer from it. You get it? So like it doesn't show that they will bounce back this year. I mean, the atmosphere doesn't look like they'll bounce back this year. So your recommendation is that they should, I don't know what your recommendation was. It a hold or a sell or a buy? I mean, what is your recommendation basically?
Okay, so yeah, Eben, my recommendation was hold on. Please, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, so my recommendation was a hold or a moderate buy. Yeah, it's basically the last statement here. So the reason why, I get your question. Thank you for the question. So you see, there are two things that are certain in life, which is debt and taxes. So one thing I've come to understand with respect to businesses is, and what they offer is, there's a very major correlation between the sentiment around the product which is offered and whether, and the tendency for people to, in the event of no real clear substitute, to still stick with it regardless. So basically what I'm trying to hint at is this. MTN's, I could not, okay. All right. Alassane, please, we've heard you. So I'm still very adamant about my position, because we don't have far to look when it comes to examples. So when you look at the revenue model of MTN, or in fact any telco, is split along the lines of voice, data, and in MTN's case, financial services. You would find that somewhere along a couple of years ago, when government introduced the CST, right, communication service tax, generally people were a bit disgruntled. And what happened was that, of course, they did negotiate a downward review of that, because government saw how unpopular it was. So they shifted the goalposts, in the manner, so to speak, they shifted the goalpost, and they claimed that they reviewed it downwards and they abolished the taxes in other areas and they shifted it to other areas. So you understand? But we need to get that the taxes in particular, even with that, they were able to sail weather the storm of the CST, and it barely made a dent in their business model. I think I might have to pull up the records from that period to justify my point. But even with the stock movement, you realize that given that period when CST was introduced, MTN stock barely budged with respect to share price history. It was very stable. Investor sentiment did not waver around it. You understand? But e-levy is obviously an entirely different conversation, but there are still some parallels that can be drawn if you really look at it. E-levy, the reason why I'm saying initially the sentiment around it would be negative, as you and I can tell, but I've been asked this question a while back, and my statement has been very consistent. This would ride out. And the reason why it will ride out is MTN has a very, very broad footprint with respect to the mobile financial services space. With respect to their agents, they have almost like several orders of magnitudes higher compared to other alternatives, you understand? And when it comes to the bank and the unbanked, you'd realize that MTN has captured an underserved group, and even with people who have banks, given the flexibility of mobile money and the nature or the setup of the wallet system, MTN still offers a certain premium that regular bank accounts don't offer. Obviously, on a broad sense, the cashless economy that we were gunning for will take a hit, but MTN would obviously not experience a huge loss from this. It would be an industry level loss, but I doubt it will be a long-term loss, or this situation will play out forever, or even considerably long, and it won't even reflect in the share price, because even generally, and I say this with all due respect, generally, if you look at the Ghana Stock Exchange and the volatility and how fundamental news affects stock, you realize that things that you would perceive as injurious to some stock actually barely causes any kind of movement. You understand? So I'm not saying this to spite the reality that we are in, but I just want you to know that this is something which MTN can easily ride out, because in terms of alternatives, the e-levy, you see, the e-levy is not targeted towards just mobile money. It's targeted towards all electronic transactions. So it is almost inescapable. Assuming it was for just mobile money, you could make a very compelling argument that indeed MTN, or in fact, the mobile financial services industry, stands to take a hit. But then it looks like everyone has a problem, or so to speak, sorry, everyone is being taxed across board. You get it? And when that happens, it means that you are not really jumping to a better alternative. Of course, people say Vodafone is offering debt cheap rates or so, but Vodafone doesn't have as broad a footprint, you understand? In the end, the convenience of mobile money and its unique selling point far outweighs any kind of negative sentiment. Even if it does momentarily, it doesn't in the long term. So yeah, that's basically it.
All right, so that's fine. Now, in terms of voice and data, I've seen Tigo and then Glo also trying to up their game. Okay, so now that there is a general economic hardship and MTN pricing is quite high, don't you think that a lot of people are going to switch to the Glo, because now Glo network is also stable because they also have this national roaming with Airtel Tigo, so their system is also stable now. And people, I'm thinking that MTN, now that there is a general economic hardship, people who cannot afford MTN packages would definitely go to Glo. Okay. Yeah. So do you think MTN can still ride on that, or like they will still be able to be on top?
Okay, so now, yeah, good question. Thank you. So for MTN, for that in particular, MTN has obviously seen, of course, with regulated industries, they have prices, ceilings that you work within. So it does happen that MTN is just pricing according to a particular ceiling, maybe the upper limits of the ceiling, but Tigo also can't go low enough to undercut the competition unreasonably. So you can't drop it to a certain level because regulation would prevent you. So these are just very fine margins when you really think about it. These are very fine margins. Also, to build up on that, and to some people, the value proposition of MTN, which is good quality, voice quality, and all that, it far outweighs a cost benefit argument or a cost benefit conversation or situation. You understand? So people know that maybe other networks offer something cheaper. Yes, that's public knowledge. Relatively cheaper, in fact, it's marginal. But again, what is the quality of it? MTN obviously is not just, you can call MTN on their bluff that they offer some of the best voice clarity. They actually do. The industry is best, actually. So when you look at it, MTN is not resting on that laurel that they offer, that they have some of the widest coverage. They also are focusing on how they gradually are shifting. And I think I indicated it in my submission. They gradually are focusing on how they are shifting their service revenue proportions away from voice towards data. It started. I think currently data stands at around 30-something%, which is upward, which has gone up from the previous quarter. What that means is that MTN, being digitally focused, looks to gain more from their internet service provision and apps compared to voice. Voice is like a traditional mode of revenue generation. They don't want to forfeit that position entirely, but they understand that perhaps that place is getting saturated. You can only offer so much clear voice, you understand? So that area is getting saturated. So they are venturing, and you can see even with respect to their CapEx, you can see the areas where the money is going. Better, faster internet, 5G, all those things. That is the direction. So they have a very good footing with respect to voice. It looks like they will be the forerunner for a while, for a couple of years coming. But they are also looking towards gaining a huge competitive advantage. And I think, I don't have to sell you on the fact that it's very obvious that MTN's data is the best, probably the fastest, and you get value for money. You understand? So their digital footprint is getting wider with respect to service revenue, and they are basically looking to consolidate gains in all areas. And that is happening now. So that might be a headache for a couple of years' time. I even doubt that MTN would allow that to happen, but that is not today's headache. And in the digital space, they are in a very firm lead. So it's not a worry at all. It shouldn't be a worry for any investor.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. So that's all for me, Kofi.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Okay, so for the challenges of Alassana, I think we'll move on. Maxwell.
Yes, Kofi.
This is a very good presentation. But let me just make this announcement that MTN's AGM, annual general meeting, will be coming up virtually on
when?
Okay, 30th May this year at 11 a.m. It's virtually. So the link, I'll put it on the platform. I'll just post it so that we all are able to join. So mtnghm.com, https://mtnghagm.com. So whoever would like to join, it's for shareholders, but I think the public too can decide to join.
Okay.
Maxwell, the presentation that you have made here, I'm going to focus on the recommendation.
Okay.
Do you know why it is difficult for you to be bold to say what investors should do? Do you know why?
Yeah, because it comes with risk.
Okay. All right. Let me put it this way. Normally when you're doing a presentation, you can easily say this is a buy stock, this is a sell stock, this is a hold. But in this case, you are torn between the two. Let's go to the last line again.
Yeah, here. This
okay,
one.
So I recommend a hold or moderate buy for investors looking for a long-term play in the market for Scancom PLC. All right, so don't you think if you had given us the intrinsic value, or if you had given us the dividend yield, it would have been easy for you to come out to say which direction investors should go?
Okay. To see whether it's undervalued. Okay, true.
Yeah, because as it stands now, you've left it open. The economy, we all know the state with it is now. All right. Investors have to know whether it is the right time to buy or not. So whether we are buying now, going into the future, whether we're going to get a return. But if you should ask me personally, MTN, since listing on the market, they've been very consistent in dividend payment. And this is one factor that investors or shareholders love to see. So if for anything, I would, from this analysis that we have seen, everything shows that the company is doing so marvelously well. All right. Yeah. But for the e-levy, which we must wait and see the impact in the next report. But for the e-levy, I would have said that even based on what we have said right now, it is a strong buy. You get. But it's a bit tricky here because of the e-levy. We think, I think that as time goes on, Ghanaians would continue using the platform, as in the mobile money platform. It may take a little hitch, but as time goes on, I'm sure Ghanaians will continue using it. Even though we are expecting the revenue from that side is going to drop.
Okay.
So let's wait and see by the end of the quarter again, maybe half year. With that, we can be able to tell whether the e-levy really had an impact or not. But as it stands now, I'm sure we should get the intrinsic value, dividend yield. All right. These are the stuff that investors look at. Then we can be able to tell whether we are going for a strong buy or a sell, or let's say a hold, as you are saying.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let me see. It looks like MTN, I don't know what they have done wrong, but it looks like everything is in the positive. It looks like it's apart from the A-levy, just as I said.
Yeah,
From the A-levy,
they're doing well.
doing marvelously well. And even if you pick, when you pick their reports that they sent, looks like they themselves, they've done the analysis for us already, because they stated that mobile subscribers increased by 8.4%, and which is to 27.1 million. That's huge. Mobile data subscribers also increased by 14%, which is also very huge. Active mobile money users also increased by 7.7%. You know, all these factors are in the positives. Total revenue, 34.4% increment. You know, profit after tax, 53.7%. On this face value, I won't go moderate on this. Okay, but you get us the figures so that we know the direction we can go properly. Because with the trend of dividend payments, which investors love, all right, let's see the dividend yield. Let's see the dividend yield to inform investors better, so that we know whether we're going a strong buy. I think it's a good presentation, and there's not much to say about them. Do you have any other person online to give any? Okay, so
no, I think it's just that.
I think, all right. So I beg you, when you are done with it, you can send it to Samuel Furry, all right, so that he goes through the data. We need to check whether all the data that you have put there, they are what they are. We're going to publish them, as we have we always say. All right. Okay, so thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm awaiting a response on the dividend yield and the intrinsic value.
Okay, I'll work on that.
All right, thank you so much. Eben, thanks so much for your time. All right, so have a good night.